Jake wiped the sweat from his brow as he leaned on his shovel, gazing out over the fields of golden grain. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the quiet colony of Zentrix. It was a peaceful place, far removed from the chaos of Earth that their ancestors had fled centuries ago. Life here was simple: farming, trading, and living in harmony with the alien races that shared the galaxy. But lately, something felt off. Jake couldn't quite put his finger on it, but the air seemed heavier, charged with an unspoken tension. His sister, Emily, walked up carrying a basket of freshly picked vegetables. Her dark hair was tied back, and her hands were streaked with dirt. "You've been staring at nothing for 10 minutes, she said, raising an eyebrow. "What's going on?" Jake shook his head. "I don't know. Just something feels wrong." Emily sighed, placing the basket down. "You're always worrying about something. Maybe you should take a break." Before Jake could respond, a distant rumble caught their attention. They turned to see a sleek, black ship descending toward the center of the colony. Its design was unmistakably Calith, a race known for their cold efficiency and ruthless ambition. People stopped what they were doing to watch as the ship landed, its engines whining softly before falling silent. "Why are they here?" Emily muttered under her breath. Jake shrugged, but his stomach tightened. The Calith rarely visited Zentrix unless they wanted something. He grabbed his tools and headed toward the main square, Emily trailing close behind. By the time they arrived, a small crowd had gathered around Commander Rin, the leader of the Calith Empire. Tall and imposing, his silver armor gleamed in the sunlight, and his sharp features held an air of authority that demanded respect or fear. "We come seeking knowledge," Rin announced, his voice deep and commanding. "Beneath your soil lies relics of great importance, relics that belong to all sentient beings." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Jake exchanged a glance with Emily. Relics? No one had ever mentioned anything like that before. A man stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. "This is our home. You can't just show up and start digging wherever you please." Rin's expression didn't change, but there was a flicker of impatience in his eyes. "We do not seek permission," he said coolly. "We seek cooperation. Resist, and you will regret it." The man opened his mouth to argue, but another voice cut him off. Dr. Clara Bennett, a historian who often spoke at community gatherings, pushed her way through the crowd. Her gray hair was pulled into a loose bun, and her glasses sat slightly askew on her nose. "Commander," she began, her tone measured, "if these relics truly exist, perhaps we should discuss this matter further. Rushing into excavation could be dangerous." Rin studied her for a moment, then nodded curtly. "Very well. We will meet with your leaders. But know this, the Caliph will proceed regardless of your decision." As the crowd dispersed, Jake lingered, his mind racing. Later that evening, while tending to the crops, he noticed something strange. Embedded in a rock near the edge of their field was a series of intricate symbols. They glowed faintly in the fading light, pulsing as if alive. Jake crouched down, running his fingers over the markings. A sudden warmth spread through his hand, and he jerked back in surprise. "What is it?" Emily asked, noticing his startled expression. "I don't know," Jake admitted, standing up. "But I think we need to find out." Little did they know, their discovery would set events into motion that would change not only their lives, but the fate of the entire galaxy. Jake and Emily stood in the dim light of Dr. Clara Bennett's study, the strange symbols etched into the rock resting on her cluttered desk. The historian adjusted her glasses and leaned closer, her eyes narrowing as she examined the markings. "These are ancient," she said finally, her voice tinged with awe. "I've seen similar patterns in old Earth archives, but never anything this detailed." "What do they mean?" Emily asked, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. She glanced at Jake, who was staring intently at the glowing symbols. Clara hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Legends speak of artifacts buried deep beneath Zentrix. artifacts tied to humanity's forgotten past. Some call them the tools of dormant gods. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. If these symbols are connected to those legends, then whatever lies below could be incredibly powerful. Jake frowned. Powerful how? That's the problem, Clara admitted. The stories are vague, but they all agree on one thing. Humanity once wielded abilities far beyond what we're capable of today. Abilities that made them feared across the stars. She tapped the edge of the rock lightly. These symbols may be a key to unlocking that potential. Emily shivered. You think the Caliph know about this? Is that why they're here? It's possible, Clara said. Commander Rin wouldn't come all this way unless he believed there was something valuable to gain. But if he finds these artifacts first, she trailed off, her expression grim. The siblings exchanged worried glances. They knew the Caliph weren't known for their kindness or restraint. If the artifacts truly held the power Clara described, putting them in the hands of someone like Rin could spell disaster. Later that night, unable to sleep, Jake wandered outside. The colony was quiet, the only sounds coming from the gentle rustle of leaves and the distant hum of machinery. He stared up at the stars, his mind racing. Who were they really? Were they just farmers trying to make a living, or was there something more buried within them, waiting to awaken? His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps behind him. Turning, he saw Liam approaching. A former soldier turned mechanic, Liam had a no-nonsense demeanor and a knack for fixing anything that broke. He carried a toolbox slung over one shoulder and nodded toward Jake. Couldn't sleep either. Something like that, Jake replied. What about you? Liam sighed, setting the toolbox down. I don't trust the Caliph. Something about this whole situation feels wrong. People are scared, and when people get scared, they stop thinking clearly. Jake nodded. We found something earlier. Symbols carved into a rock near our field. Dr. Bennett thinks they might be connected to some kind of ancient artifact. Liam raised an eyebrow. Artifacts. Like treasure maps. More like keys to something bigger, Jake explained. Something powerful. Liam didn't respond immediately, his gaze drifting toward the horizon, where the Caliph's ship loomed in the distance. Finally, he spoke. If it's powerful enough to interest the Caliph, then it's dangerous enough to worry about. We need to figure out what they're after before they get too far. Over the next few days, the trio decided to investigate further. They snuck into restricted areas near the excavation site, avoiding patrols of Caliph soldiers. The ground was scarred with deep trenches, evidence of relentless digging. Machines whirred and clanked as workers unearthed layer after layer of soil and rock. One evening, while hiding behind a stack of crates, Emily spotted something glinting in the dirt. Carefully, she reached out and picked it up, a small metallic shard shaped like a crescent moon. It pulsed faintly in her hand, sending a warm sensation coursing through her fingers. Guys, she whispered, holding it up. Look at this. Jake and Liam crowded around her, their eyes widening. The shard seemed to hum with energy, its surface covered in the same intricate symbols they'd seen before. This is it, Liam murmured. Whatever the Caliph are looking for, this has to be part of it. As they stood there, marveling at the shard, a sudden realization dawned on Jake. If these artifacts were tied to humanity's past, then maybe the answers they sought weren't just buried in the ground. They were buried within themselves. The shard Emily held seemed to grow warmer in her palm, its faint glow pulsing like a heartbeat. Jake reached out cautiously, his fingers brushing against the smooth surface. The moment he touched it, a jolt of energy shot through him, making him stumble back. His vision blurred for a second, and when it cleared, he saw flashes, images of towering figures wielding weapons that crackled with light, battles fought among stars, and a voice whispering words he couldn't understand. Are you okay? Emily asked, her eyes wide with concern. Jake nodded slowly, though his mind was racing. I think so, but something happened when I touched it. Liam frowned, glancing around nervously. We should get out of here before someone sees us. They hurried away from the excavation site, slipping into the shadows as Caliph guards patrolled nearby. Back at their makeshift hideout, an old storage shed on the edge of the colony, they spread out what they had found. Alongside the crescent-shaped shard were fragments of other artifacts Liam had scavenged during previous nights. Each piece wore the same strange symbols, glowing faintly as if alive. "This isn't just some random junk," Liam said, turning one of the shards over in his hands. "It's like it's waiting for something." "For us?" Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake didn't answer. He couldn't shake the images he'd seen, the warriors, the battles, the sense of overwhelming power. It felt both thrilling and terrifying, as if part of him wanted to embrace it while another part screamed to run away. Dr. Clara Bennett arrived later that evening, her face pale and drawn. She'd heard rumors spreading quickly through the colony about the Caliph's progress. "They're close," she told them. "Too close. If they find what they're looking for, we may not be able to stop them." "What exactly are they looking for?" Jake asked. Clara hesitated, then pulled out an old tablet from her bag. On its screen was a faded illustration of a massive machine, a structure resembling a spire, covered in the same symbols as the artifacts. "This is what the legends call the Nexus Core," she explained. "It's said to amplify human abilities to unimaginable levels. If activated, it could awaken powers long buried within us." Emily stared at the image, her heart pounding. "And the Caliph want to use it." "They wouldn't hesitate," Clara said grimly. "Commander Rin sees humanity as a threat, even in our current state. Imagine what he'd do if we became stronger than ever before." As the days passed, tensions in the colony grew unbearable. Protests erupted outside the Caliph's operations center, with settlers demanding answers. Commander Rin responded by deploying armed patrols throughout the area, silencing dissent with threats of force. Fear hung heavy in the air, but Jake, Emily, and Liam refused to give up. One night, driven by desperation, they ventured deeper into the restricted zone. Using stolen access codes and careful timing, they managed to slip past the guards and enter a cavernous chamber where the Caliph had set up their main operation. In the center of the room stood a massive machine, partially unearthed and unmistakably the Nexus Core from Clara's illustration. "It's real," Emily breathed, her voice trembling. Before they could move closer, alarms blared, red lights flashing across the chamber. Guards rushed toward them, weapons raised. Thinking quickly, Liam grabbed one of the shards and hurled it at a nearby console. Sparks flew as the system shorted out, plunging the room into darkness. "Run," Jake shouted. They sprinted through the chaos, narrowly avoiding capture. As they escaped into the night, Jake glanced back at the excavation site. Deep down, he knew this was only the beginning. Whatever secrets lay hidden beneath Zentrix, they were waking up, and soon nothing would ever be the same again. The trio stumbled back to their hideout, breathless and shaken from their narrow escape. Jake's mind raced as he replayed the events of the night. The sight of the Nexus Core, the alarms blaring, the Caliph soldiers closing in. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. Whatever the machine was capable of, it was clear the Caliph were close to unlocking its secrets. Inside the storage shed, Liam slammed the door shut and leaned against it, his chest heaving. "That was too close," he muttered. "We can't keep doing this. Sooner or later, they'll catch us." Emily sank onto an old crate, her hands trembling as she clutched the crescent-shaped shard they'd brought back. "But we can't just stop. If we do, the Caliph will have all the power. We have to figure out what these things can do, before they do." Jake nodded slowly. "She's right. There has to be a way to use them without letting the Caliph get their hands on them." Clara arrived shortly after, her face pale with worry. She had heard about the chaos at the excavation site and feared the worst. When she saw the shard Emily held, her eyes widened. "You've activated one of them," she said quietly. "What happened?" Jake hesitated, then explained the surge of energy he felt when he touched it, the visions, the voices, the sense of overwhelming strength. Clara listened intently, her brow furrowed in thought. "These artifacts aren't just tools," she said finally. "They're keys to unlocking abilities buried deep within your DNA. Abilities humanity once used to dominate the galaxy." Liam frowned. "So what you're saying is, we're supposed to become some kind of superhumans?" "In theory, yes," Clara replied. "But it won't be easy. The process could be dangerous, both physically and mentally. You'll need to prepare yourselves." Over the next few days, the group began experimenting with the shards under Clara's guidance. They started small, testing how each piece reacted to their touch. At first, nothing seemed to happen. But one evening, as Jake focused on the shard he held, something changed. A warm glow spread through his body, and suddenly he felt lighter, faster. He moved his hand instinctively, and a nearby tool floated off the ground, hovering in midair. "What the?" Liam stared, wide-eyed. "Did you just do that?" Jake lowered the tool gently, his heart pounding. "I think so." Encouraged by the breakthrough, Emily tried next. Holding the crescent shard tightly, she closed her eyes and concentrated. A faint hum filled the air, and a shimmering barrier appeared around her, deflecting a thrown rock Liam tossed her way. "This is insane," Liam muttered, shaking his head. "How are we even doing this?" Clara watched silently, her expression a mix of awe and concern. "It's working," she said finally, "but you're only scratching the surface. To unlock your full potential, you'll need to face deeper challenges, ones that test not just your bodies, but your minds." As the days turned into weeks, the trio pushed themselves harder than ever before. Jake discovered he could manipulate objects with his mind, lifting heavier items and moving them with precision. Emily learned to create protective shields strong enough to withstand blunt force. Liam, meanwhile, found himself able to move faster than he ever thought possible, dodging obstacles and reacting in the blink of an eye. But the process took its toll. Each session left them exhausted, their bodies aching and their thoughts clouded. Jake often dreamed of the warriors he'd seen in his vision, their faces blurred but their intentions clear. They called to him, urging him to embrace the power fully. It scared him, but also tempted him. One night, as they rested after another grueling practice, Clara spoke up. "You're making progress, but you need to remember why you're doing this. Power like this isn't meant to be wielded lightly. If you lose control, or worse, let it consume you, you risk becoming exactly what the Caliph fear." Jake looked down at the shard in his hand, its faint glow reflecting in his eyes. "We know," he said softly. "But if we don't master this, the Caliph will. And if that happens," he didn't finish the sentence. None of them needed him to. Outside, the colony remained tense. Commander Rin's forces tightened their grip, and whispers of rebellion spread among the settlers. Jake, Emily, and Liam knew they couldn't delay any longer. The final pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, and soon they would have to make a choice. Would they rise to meet the challenge, or crumble under the weight of their own potential? The colony of Zentrix was on edge. Whispers of betrayal spread like wildfire after one of their own, a trusted mechanic named Daniel, was caught sneaking into the Caliph compound late at night. He had been feeding Commander Rin information about Jake, Emily, and Liam's activities. The trio barely escaped capture when Caliph soldiers stormed their hideout, but they knew it was only a matter of time before Rin found them. "We can't stay here," Liam said urgently as they regrouped in an abandoned outpost deep in the wilderness. "If Daniel told them everything, they'll be hunting us nonstop." Emily clenched her fists, anger simmering beneath her calm exterior. How could he do this? We trusted him. Jake stared out at the horizon, his jaw tight. "It doesn't matter now. What matters is staying alive long enough to finish what we started." Inside the outpost, they discovered more artifacts hidden among old crates and dusty equipment. These relics were larger and more intricate than the shards they'd found earlier. One of them, a jagged crystal fragment, pulsed with an intense light when Jake touched it. Images flooded his mind again. Battles fought across star systems, entire fleets crushed by a single gesture, and voices chanting words he still couldn't understand. When he came back to reality, his hands trembled. "What did you see?" Emily asked softly, noticing his unease. "Too much," Jake replied, shaking his head. "This power, it's not just about strength or speed. It's something bigger, something dangerous." Clara arrived later that evening, her face pale but determined. She carried a data pad filled with new information she'd uncovered about humanity's past. According to ancient records, humans hadn't always been peaceful settlers. Long ago, they had ruled vast empires, wielding abilities that made them nearly invincible. But their unchecked aggression led to catastrophic wars, forcing survivors to abandon their violent ways and flee to new worlds like Centrix. The Nexus core amplifies those abilities, Clara explained. But it also brings out the worst in people: their anger, their greed, their lust for control. That's why our ancestors buried it. They knew its power would destroy them if left unchecked. Liam frowned, pacing back and forth. "So, what are you saying? That using this thing will turn us into monsters?" "It's a risk," Clara admitted, "but it's also your best chance against the Caliph. If you can master the artifacts and resist the darker impulses they awaken, you might stand a chance." As the days passed, tensions grew thicker. News reached them that Commander Rin had fully unearthed the Nexus core. Its towering spire dominated the excavation site, glowing with an eerie energy. Settlers whispered of strange occurrences: machines malfunctioning, crops wilting overnight, and animals fleeing the area. The air itself seemed charged, crackling with unseen forces. One evening, while practicing with the artifacts, Emily felt something shift inside her. The crescent shard pulsed brighter than ever before, and a wave of energy surged through her body. She raised her hand instinctively, and a bolt of light shot out, striking a nearby tree and splitting it in half. "Whoa!" Liam exclaimed, jumping back. "Did you mean to do that?" Emily shook her head, breathing heavily. "No, I didn't." Jake stepped closer, concern etched on his face. "Are you okay?" "I think so," Emily replied, though her voice wavered. "But it's getting harder to control. Every time I use it, it feels like it's pulling something out of me, something I don't want to let go." Jake nodded grimly. He understood the feeling. Each time he tapped into the artifact's power, he felt a shadow creeping into his thoughts, tempting him to embrace the violence and chaos within. It terrified him, but it also intrigued him in ways he hated to admit. Meanwhile, Commander Rin prepared for the final phase of his plan. He intended to activate the Nexus core during a public demonstration, showcasing its power to the galaxy, and solidifying the Caliph Empire's dominance. For Jake, Emily, and Liam, the clock was ticking. They had to act quickly, but they weren't sure they were ready. That night, as they sat around a small fire, Jake broke the silence. "If we're going to stop him, we need to be smarter than brute force. This isn't just about fighting. It's about outthinking him." Emily nodded. "And remembering who we are. If we lose ourselves in the process, then we've already lost." Liam smirked faintly. "Well, let's hope we're better at saving the galaxy than we are at keeping secrets." None of them laughed. The weight of their mission pressed down on them, heavier than ever. Tomorrow, they would face Commander Rin and whatever awaited them beyond. The morning sun rose over Zentrix, casting long shadows across the colony. Jake, Emily, and Liam stood at the edge of the wilderness, staring toward the excavation site where the Nexus core loomed like a dark monolith. Its glow pulsed rhythmically, as if alive, and the air around it shimmered with unnatural energy. The Caliph forces were everywhere. Soldiers patrolled in tight formations, their weapons glinting in the light, while settlers watched helplessly from a distance. "This is it," Jake said quietly, his voice steady despite the knot in his stomach. "We can't wait any longer." Emily nodded, clutching the crescent shard tightly. Her knuckles were white, but her expression was resolute. "Whatever happens, we stick together. No matter what." Liam adjusted the strap of his makeshift harness, loaded with tools and artifacts they'd gathered. "Let's just hope this works. If we mess up, we're not getting a second chance." They moved cautiously, sticking to the shadows as they approached the site. The Caliph had set up barricades and checkpoints, but the trio used their newfound abilities to slip past unnoticed. Jake used his telekinetic powers to lift debris and create distractions, while Emily formed protective barriers to shield them from prying eyes. Liam darted ahead, using his enhanced speed to scout the area and signal when the coast was clear. Finally, they reached the heart of the excavation site, the Nexus core. It was even more imposing up close, its surface covered in intricate symbols that pulsed with an otherworldly light. Commander Rin stood nearby, barking orders to his soldiers as technicians worked furiously to activate the machine. His silver armor gleamed under the artificial lights, and his cold gaze swept over the area, searching for any sign of trouble. Jake took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm raging inside him. He could feel the power coursing through his veins, urging him to act, to strike. But he knew rushing in would only get them killed. They needed a plan. "Emily, you stay back and cover us," he whispered. "Liam, you go left and draw their attention. I'll head straight for the core." "You sure about this?" Liam asked, raising an eyebrow. "No," Jake admitted, "but we don't have time to argue." With a nod, Liam sprinted off, weaving between equipment and dodging patrols. His movements were so fast that the Caliph soldiers barely registered his presence before alarms blared, drawing their focus away from the core. Taking advantage of the chaos, Jake dashed forward, his heart pounding as he closed the distance to the machine. Commander Rin turned sharply, his eyes locking onto Jake. "You?" he growled, stepping forward. "I should have known you'd show up." Jake stopped, his hands trembling. He could feel the shard in his pocket vibrating, responding to the core's energy. "You don't understand what you're doing," he said, his voice firm. "This isn't just a weapon. It's a curse." Rin smirked, unimpressed. "A curse or salvation? Either way, it will ensure the Caliph Empire's dominance." Before Jake could respond, Rin lunged, moving faster than expected. The two clashed in a blur of motion, Rin wielding a blade charged with energy, while Jake relied on his telekinetic abilities to deflect blows and counterattack. The battle was fierce, each strike reverberating through the air. Jake felt the strain building, the effort of controlling his powers pushing him to his limits. Meanwhile, Emily held her ground, forming barriers to block incoming fire from Caliph soldiers. Sweat dripped down her face as she concentrated, the crescent shard glowing brighter with every passing moment. She could feel the energy draining her, but she refused to give up. Not now. Liam reappeared, taking out guards with swift, precise strikes. "Hurry up," he shouted, tossing Jake a tool to disable part of the core's system. Jake caught it mid-air and jammed it into a panel on the machine. Sparks flew, and the core's pulsing light faltered for a moment. Rin roared in anger, pressing the attack harder. Jake stumbled, his strength waning, but he gritted his teeth and pushed back. "We're running out of time," Emily yelled, her barrier flickering under the barrage of enemy fire. Jake glanced at the core, then at Rin. There was no choice left. Summoning every ounce of strength, he unleashed a surge of energy, slamming Rin backward and knocking him off balance. With one final effort, Jake activated the tool, causing the Nexus core to overload. The machine shuddered violently, its light dimming as the symbols on its surface faded. The Caliph forces hesitated, unsure of what to do next. For now, the immediate threat was neutralized, but Jake knew this wasn't the end. The power within them was still there, waiting to be awakened again. The Nexus core let out a final deafening hum before falling silent. Its glow dimmed completely, leaving the excavation site bathed in an eerie stillness. Jake collapsed to his knees, his body trembling from exhaustion. The surge of energy he had unleashed left him drained, his mind foggy and his muscles weak. Emily rushed to his side, her hand steadying him as she scanned the area for any remaining threats. Commander Rin staggered to his feet, his silver armor scuffed and dented. His expression was one of pure fury, his sharp eyes blazing with hatred. "You fools," he snarled, his voice cutting through the silence. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Jake forced himself to stand, leaning on Emily for support. "We stopped you," he said, his voice hoarse but defiant. "That's all that matters." Rin took a step forward, but Liam intercepted him, standing firm despite the fatigue etched on his face. "Don't even think about it," Liam warned, holding up a makeshift weapon. "Your little show is over." For a moment, it seemed like Rin might charge anyway, but then he paused, his gaze flicking between the trio. A cruel smile slowly spread across his face. "This isn't the end," he said coldly. "You may have delayed us, but humanity's awakening has already begun. You can't bury what's been unearthed." Before anyone could respond, Rin signaled his forces to retreat. The Caliph soldiers fell back in perfect formation, their movements disciplined and efficient. Within minutes, they were gone, disappearing into their ships as engines roared to life. The colony watched in stunned silence as the vessels ascended into the sky, leaving behind only dust and destruction. When the last ship vanished from sight, the settlers erupted into cheers. People poured out of hiding, rushing toward Jake, Emily, and Liam. Some clapped them on the back, others hugged them tightly, tears streaming down their faces. For the first time in weeks, there was hope in the air, a fragile, tentative hope, but hope nonetheless. Dr. Clara Bennett arrived soon after, her face pale but relieved. She pushed through the crowd and embraced the trio, her voice thick with emotion. "You did it," she whispered. "You saved us." Jake shook his head, his expression somber. "We bought some time, that's all. This isn't over, not really." Emily nodded, her grip tightening on the crescent shard. "He's right. We stopped the Caliph for now, but they'll be back. And next time, we might not be so lucky." Clara sighed, glancing at the dormant Nexus core. "What happens now? Do we destroy it? Hide it again?" Liam frowned, rubbing the back of his neck. Destroying it might be impossible. And hiding it, well, how do we know someone else won't find it? Someone worse than the Caliph. Jake looked at the ground, thinking hard. Finally, he spoke. "We protect it. All of us. Together. If this power exists, then it's our responsibility to make sure it's used wisely, or not at all." Over the following days, the colony worked together to secure the site. The Nexus core was carefully dismantled and transported to a hidden location deep underground, guarded by trusted settlers. Dr. Bennett proposed forming a coalition, a group dedicated to studying the artifacts and monitoring humanity's latent abilities. Her goal was clear: to ensure that such power would never again fall into the wrong hands. As life slowly returned to normal, Jake, Emily, and Liam found themselves changed. They carried the weight of what they had done and what they had become with quiet determination. Each of them struggled with the lingering effects of the artifact's influence, the shadows of doubt and temptation always lurking at the edges of their minds. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Jake stood alone on a hill overlooking the fields where everything had started. Emily joined him, sitting quietly beside him as they watched the stars appear one by one. "What are you thinking about?" she asked softly. Jake hesitated, then shrugged. "Everything. Us. What we are. What we could become." Emily smiled faintly. "We'll figure it out. Together." Jake nodded, though his thoughts remained heavy. Humanity had awakened, or at least taken its first steps toward doing so. Whether they chose wisdom or war would define not just their future, but the fate of the galaxy itself. Weeks turned into months, and life on Zentrix settled into a fragile rhythm. The scars of the Calith's invasion were still visible, craters in the fields, burned-out buildings at the colony's edge. But the settlers worked tirelessly to rebuild. Jake, Emily, and Liam became reluctant heroes, their names whispered with both admiration and unease. People respected what they had done, but there was also fear. Fear of the power they now carried within them. The artifacts, now safely hidden beneath layers of rock and steel, remained under constant watch. Dr. Clara Bennett led the coalition she had proposed, gathering historians, scientists, and trusted leaders to study the relics. Their goal was clear: to understand humanity's latent abilities without letting them spiral out of control. Meetings were held regularly, debates often heated, but everyone agreed on one thing: they couldn't let history repeat itself. Jake spent most of his days helping with the excavation cleanup, though his mind rarely stayed focused on the work. He could still feel the hum of energy inside him, faint but persistent, like a voice whispering just out of reach. It wasn't always easy to resist its pull. Sometimes, when he was alone, he would close his eyes and imagine what it might be like to fully embrace that power, to move mountains, to command armies, to reshape the galaxy itself. Then he would shake his head, reminding himself of the cost. Power like that came with a price, and he wasn't willing to pay it. Emily struggled in her own way. The crescent shard had become an extension of her, its warmth comforting yet unsettling. She practiced controlling her abilities in secret, creating barriers and deflecting objects until her arms ached. But every time she pushed too far, she felt something shift inside her, a flicker of anger or frustration that threatened to overwhelm her. "I don't want this," she confessed to Jake one evening. "But I can't ignore it either." Liam, ever practical, threw himself into physical labor, repairing machinery and fortifying the colony's defenses. His speed made him invaluable, but it also isolated him. People avoided getting too close, unsure of how to act around someone who moved faster than the eye could follow. "They'll get used to it," he told himself, though he wasn't entirely convinced. Commander Rin's warning lingered in their minds. Humanity's awakening had begun, and there was no turning back. News from other colonies hinted at similar discoveries. Artifacts unearthed, strange powers emerging. The galaxy was changing, and the settlers of Zentrix knew they weren't alone in navigating this new reality. One night, the trio gathered on the same hill where they had stood after the battle. The air was cool, the stars bright against the dark sky. Clara joined them, carrying a small device that emitted a soft blue light. "I've been thinking," she said, her tone thoughtful, "about why these artifacts exist. They weren't created to destroy. They were created to evolve, to push humanity forward. But evolution isn't guaranteed," Jake replied. "It can go wrong." Clara nodded. "That's why we need safeguards, rules, limits." Emily sighed, staring at the horizon. "And if someone breaks those rules?" "Then we stop them," Liam said firmly. "No matter what." For a long moment, no one spoke. The weight of their responsibility hung heavy between them, but so did a sense of resolve. They had faced the worst of themselves and survived. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. As the first rays of dawn broke over the hills, Jake stood up, brushing dirt from his hands. "We'll figure it out," he said quietly. "Step by step." Emily smiled, standing beside him. "Yeah, together." Liam grinned, flapping Jake on the shoulder. "Just don't make me run another marathon anytime soon." They laughed, the sound carrying across the quiet fields. Humanity's future was uncertain, full of risks and unknowns. But for now, they had each other, and that was enough.